The Star Wars galaxy isn't just a sweeping space opera about destiny, family, and laser swords. It's also one of the most elaborate junk drawers in cinema history. A hoarder's paradise of pop culture references, inside jokes, and visual whispers. The saga is packed with objects and ideas that didn't originate in a galaxy far, far away at all. They came from old monster movies, forgotten war films, Flash Gordon serials, and the personal obsessions of a young filmmaker who grew up devouring everything projected onto a screen. George Lucas didn't just build a universe, he remixed cinema itself. The theory goes like this: if you pause Star Wars at the right frame, the illusion doesn't break. It deepens. The world becomes infinitely cooler the more closely you look. We aren't talking about the obvious moments fans love to point out, like the stormtrooper bonking his head on the Death Star doorway in A New Hope. That moment became so iconic that Lucas later added a sound effect in the special editions, effectively canonizing a production accident. It's a perfect example of how chaos, imperfection, and playfulness are baked into the DNA of Star Wars. But the real magic lives deeper in the background. For decades, fans have combed through grainy VHS copies, laserdiscs, DVDs, Blu-rays, and now pristine 4K restorations, hunting for details hiding in plain sight. What they've uncovered is a dense web of references tying Jedi Knights to Akira Kurosawa, Steven Spielberg, World War II dogfight footage, 1950s sci-fi serials, and even Lucas's own experimental student films. The Star Wars universe, it turns out, is less a singular invention and more a cinematic collage, a carefully curated museum of the things Lucas loved most. Nowhere is this clearer than in the production design. Unlike the sleek, pristine sci-fi worlds that came before it, Star Wars looks used. Ships are scratched, droids are dented, walls are stained with grease and history. This wasn't accidental. Lucas famously wanted his universe to feel lived in, like a future built on the ruins of countless forgotten pasts. To achieve that effect, the prop department didn't just invent new objects, they repurposed old ones. Real-world airplane parts became starship interiors. Tank components turned into weapons. Old camera pieces were glued onto control panels to create the illusion of advanced technology. If something looked vaguely mechanical, it could become sci-fi with enough paint and imagination. This approach didn't just save money, it created texture. The Millennium Falcon feels real because, on some level, it is real. It's a Frankenstein monster built from the bones of Earth's industrial history. And then there are the intentional Easter eggs. In The Phantom Menace, sharp-eyed fans spotted shapes in the Galactic Senate chambers that suspiciously resemble E.T., Yoda, and other familiar silhouettes, a playful nod to Lucas's friendship with Spielberg. In Revenge of the Sith, a piece of machinery bears an uncanny resemblance to the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark, another Lucas-Spielberg collaboration. These aren't accidents. They're cinematic winks, reminders that these stories don't exist in isolation. They exist in conversation with one another. Even character designs echo older films. Darth Vader's helmet draws from samurai armor, World War II German helmets, and pulp villain aesthetics. The Stormtrooper's name itself comes from Nazi Sturmtruppen, while their armor evokes both futuristic soldiers and plastic toy simplicity. The Empire feels familiar because it's assembled from historical visual language we already associate with authoritarian power. This remix mentality extends beyond props and visuals into storytelling itself. Star Wars borrows shamelessly from Joseph Campbell's Mono Man, Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, westerns, and war movies. The trench run in A New Hope is essentially a World War II bombing raid, complete with radio chatter and tight cockpit shots. Lightsaber duels evolve from swashbuckling sword fights to operatic martial arts ballets. Lucas wasn't hiding his influences, he was celebrating them. And yet, despite being stitched together from so many sources, Star Wars never feels hollow. That's the trick. Like a great DJ sampling old records, Lucas transformed familiar elements into something emotionally new. The references don't distract, they enrich. They give the universe depth, as if it has its own archaeological layers. Every background object feels like it has a story, even if that story started in a prop warehouse in England. In this sense, the Star Wars galaxy really is a junkyard, but not a messy one. It's a curated scrapyard, where discarded ideas and forgotten genres are reborn as myth. The cantina isn't just a bar, it's a lineup of monster movie leftovers given new life. Jabba's palace feels ancient because it echoes old fantasy tyrants and pulp villains. Even droids, with their beeps and clinks, feel like descendants of silent-era robots and early sci-fi dreams. What fans discovered through years of obsessive frame-by-frame analysis is that Star Wars rewards attention. It invites you to look closer, to notice the seams, the welds, the fingerprints of the artists who built it. The background of every shot really is a trophy case for the prop department, a love letter to cinema history disguised as space junk. And that might be the most important lesson of all. Star Wars isn't iconic because it was completely original. It's iconic because it understood something fundamental about storytelling. Originality doesn't mean inventing from nothing. It means remixing with intention, taking the things you love, smashing them together, and finding the emotional truth buried in the debris. So the next time you watch Star Wars, don't just follow the heroes.
To the cantina.
Let your eyes wander. Pause the frame. Study the walls, the ships, the clutter. Because somewhere in that galactic junkyard, you're not just seeing a galaxy far, far away. You're seeing the entire history of cinema staring back at you. Let's start with the one that breaks the fourth wall so hard it practically shatters the camera lens. In The Phantom Menace, during the Galactic Senate scene where Queen Amidala is calling for a vote of no confidence, look at the bottom left of the screen. In one of the floating pods, you can clearly see 3 members of E.T.'s species. And this isn't just a random asset reuse. It's a deliberate nod to Steven Spielberg. Spielberg had included a Yoda costume in E.T. for Halloween, implying Star Wars exists as fiction in E.T.'s world. Lucas fired back by putting E.T.'s people, the Asogians, directly into the Star Wars Senate. Fans love this because it creates a recursive loop of madness. If E.T. exists in Star Wars and E.T. visits Earth, does that mean Earth is part of the Republic? Did E.T. recognize the Yoda kid on Halloween because he knows who Yoda is historically? It's a fun little breadcrumb that implies the little guy with a glowing finger isn't just a botanist. He's a political delegate from the planet Brodo Asogi. It makes that bicycle flight across the moon feel a lot less like magic and a lot more like a very low-budget force levitation. Fast forward to Andor, a series that feels like it wandered into Star Wars by accident wearing a trench coat and carrying a moral crisis. This is arguably the most grown-up the franchise has ever felt. Less myth, more machinery. No prophecies, no chosen ones, no glowing swords solving emotional problems. Just oppression, surveillance, radicalization, and the quiet terror of living under an empire that runs on paperwork. And to strip Star Wars down to its ideological bones. And yet, in the middle of all this grit and realism, set decorators absolutely lost their minds. Enter Luthen Rail's Antique Shop, a place that, on the surface, looks like a classy Coruscant boutique for wealthy collectors with too much credit and not enough curiosity. It's all calm lighting, curated artifacts, and polite conversations. But if you know where to look, if you pause, zoom, squint, and obsess, this shop reveals itself as one of the most lore-dense locations Star Wars has ever put on screen. This isn't just a store. It's a museum, a confession, a threat, and maybe the most honest metaphor Star Wars has ever made about itself. At a basic level, Luthen's shop exists as camouflage. It's a front, a respectable face for a man secretly orchestrating rebellion on a galactic scale. But the objects inside the shop tell a deeper story, one about history, legacy, and the cost of resistance. Every artifact feels like it was chosen with intent, not just by the character, but by the creators behind the scenes. If you squint at the shelves in the background, you're not just looking at decorations. You're looking at a hall of fame of Star Wars deep cuts. Let's start with the Mandalorian armor. Sitting quietly among the relics is a suit of armor that looks very familiar to longtime fans, specifically fans of Knights of the Old Republic. Its angular design and color schemes strongly resemble Neo-Crusader armor, worn by Mandalorians during the Mandalorian Wars thousands of years before the Skywalker saga. This isn't the shiny Beskar look popularized by The Mandalorian. This is older, sharper, more ideological. And that's the point. For years, fans were told that Legends material, games, novels, comics, had been wiped clean by Disney, rebranded as non-canon, politely shelved. But here it is, hiding in plain sight. Not explained, not highlighted, just acknowledged. A quiet nod that says, we remember this too. It's not nostalgia bait. It's respect. Then things get weirder. On one of the shelves behind Luthen, there's a familiar object encased in carbonite, a whip. Not just any whip. That whip is unmistakably Indiana Jones' bullwhip. Frozen in carbonite like Han Solo, preserved as a relic of adventure cinema history, and right next to it, the Sankara stones from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This isn't subtle. It's borderline unhinged. Within the universe, you could argue these are just ancient artifacts from forgotten cultures. But on a meta level, this is Lucasfilm winking directly at the audience. Indiana Jones is George Lucas' DNA. Seeing these objects in Andor isn't just a joke, it's a statement. It's the franchise openly admitting that Star Wars has always been built from the same creative soil as Indy, Flash Gordon, Kurosawa, and pulp adventure serials. Luthen's shop doesn't just sell history, it hoards it. And then there's the helmet, sitting quietly, almost arrogantly, is a helmet that looks exactly like the one worn by Starkiller, Darth Vader's secret apprentice from the Force Unleashed video games. For fans, this was the moment. Screenshots exploded across social media. Lore channels went feral. Because Starkiller isn't just a random character. He represents an era when Star Wars storytelling was wild, messy, and unafraid to break the power scale in half. Seeing that helmet in live action was shocking precisely because Andor is so restrained. This is a show that avoids Jedi and Sith almost entirely. And yet here's a symbol of raw, unhinged Force power, just sitting there, gathering dust. That's important, because Luthen's shop isn't celebrating these artifacts. It's archiving them. This is fan service done with the elegance of a museum exhibit. Nothing is labeled. Nothing is explained. The show doesn't stop to say, hey, remember this? If you recognize it, that's on you. If you don't, it still works as texture. The objects feel heavy with unseen history, whether you know the details or not. And that mirrors the philosophy of Andor itself. This show isn't interested in mythologizing heroes. It's interested in consequences. The shop's artifacts represent past rebellions, fallen orders, forgotten wars, and abandoned ideals. They're reminders that history doesn't disappear, it accumulates. Resistance leaves debris. Revolutions leave artifacts behind. Luthen himself embodies this contradiction. He preserves the past while actively destroying the present. He understands that rebellion isn't clean. It isn't heroic. It requires sacrifice, manipulation, and moral compromise. His shop is full of beautiful things born from violence, struggle, and belief. And now they're just collectibles for the elite. That's the real horror of Luthen's shop. Not the Easter eggs, but what they mean. This isn't a place of triumph. It's a graveyard of movements that came before. Each object is a reminder that rebellion is cyclical, that today's radical becomes tomorrow's antique, that even the most powerful stories eventually get placed behind glass. Did I end that sense? Luthen's shop is a perfect metaphor for Star Wars itself, a franchise built on rebellion, now preserved, curated, and sold. And Andor, quietly and brilliantly, uses fan service, not to glorify the past, but to interrogate it. To ask what these symbols are worth when stripped of myth and context. Oh yes, fans went into a frenzy spotting Starkiller's helmet and Indiana Jones' whip. And yes, it's incredibly fun. But beneath the excitement is something darker and smarter. A reminder that history, in Star Wars as in real life, doesn't vanish. It waits on a shelf, in the background, until someone is desperate enough to use it again. If you watch enough of this franchise, you start seeing the number 1138 everywhere. It's like a conspiracy theory that's actually true. This is a reference to George Lucas's first film, THX 1138. In A New Hope, Luke and Han transfer Chewie from cell block 1138. In The Phantom Menace, the battle droid that gets knocked over has 1138 written on its back. Even in The Force Awakens, the police designation for the Clone Wars era is Code 1138.
Keep those lasers
It's the kind of
clear.
compulsive
They're right behind
self-referencing
us.
that makes you realize how personal this massive
Almost
franchise
there.
is.
Just a little farther to the
Lucas
target.
isn't just
I'll
building
get-
a world, he's tagging it. It's graffiti. Every time you see that number, it's a reminder that before the toy empires and the billions of dollars, this was just a guy making weird, experimental sci-fi movies in college. It's the DNA of the creator stamped onto the hull of the Star Destroyer. George Lucas has never been shy about his influences, and Stanley Kubrick is right at the top of that list. In The Phantom Menace, when Kagan goes to Watto's junkyard to haggle for hyperdrive parts, take a look at the junk pile.
To the cantina.
Tucked away in the clutter is an EVA pod from 2001, A Space Odyssey. It's rusted, beaten up, and sitting there like a discarded washing machine. This is huge because 2001 is the movie that proved sci-fi could be serious art. By tossing one of its most iconic vehicles into a literal garbage heap on Tatooine, Lucas is doing two things. One, he's paying homage. Two, he's subtly suggesting that the clean, sterile future of Kubrick's vision has decayed into the lived-in, dirty universe of Star Wars. It's a visual passing of the torch, executed with a piece of scrap metal. Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. In Return of the Jedi, Jabba's palace is filled with scum and villainy, but the names of his skiff guards aren't random alien gibberish. You have the species Klaatu, Barada, and Nikto. Horror and sci-fi buffs recognize this immediately. It's the command phrase from the 1951 classic The Day the Earth Stood Still, the words used to control the robot Gort. It's also the phrase Ash Williams messes up in Army of Darkness, but that came later. Lucas took the most famous "Don't destroy the world" phrase in sci-fi history and turned it into three ugly guys with axes trying to push Luke Skywalker into a sandpit. It's playful, it's nerdy, and it shows that the people making these movies were massive fans of the genre long before they defined it. They weren't just making a movie, they were playing in a sandbox built by the movies they watched growing up. People love to hate on the prequels, but the continuity control was actually insane. In Revenge of the Sith, right after Obi-Wan and Anakin crash land the Invisible Hand, half of it anyway, there's a wide shot of the Senate building transport docks. If you look at the bottom right of the screen, pulling into a docking bay, is a YT-1300 freighter. Lucasfilm confirmed it. That is the Millennium Falcon. It makes sense chronologically, the ship is old, and at this point, it's likely being flown by whoever owned it before Lando or Han got their hands on it. It's just a tiny blue streak in a busy frame, but it anchors the ship in the history of the Republic. It was there when democracy fell. It was probably hauling illegal cargo, while Palpatine was giving a speech. It's a ghost of the future flying through the past.